Hi, I'm here in Plains, Georgia with my good friend Jan Williams, who's not only a long-standing member of the community here, but also the manager of the Historic Inn. And we'll talk about the Historic Inn in a little bit, but I wanted to get a few questions in before that. How long have you lived in Plains?
I have been here soon to be 47 years, married to a wonderful man.
Married to a wonderful man,
who's lived
yes.
here all of his life.
I'll agree with that. I know George well. I know George well. And you grew up in Georgia, though?
Yes, I did. About maybe 25 miles from here, just on the other end of the county.
Okay, and then 46 years ago you moved here, and your husband is George, is from here originally,
Yes.
right? He grew up here in Plains. You've seen a lot of history here in Plains.
Definitely.
Over the years. When President Carter, or then Jimmy Carter, ran for governor, and he became governor, in this small town, that must have been big news in and of itself.
It was. He was the first governor of Georgia that I got to vote for. I was in college when he was running for governor, but it was exciting for everybody in this town to have a man from a small town become the governor of Georgia. Of course, it took him 2 times to get elected,
Sure.
but that's okay. People realized he was a great man.
Sure. And did you or your husband, or both of you, did you see a lot of changes in the town? Because this town is a very quaint and very small town. I tell a lot of people it's like being on the Andy Griffith Show when we come here, because it truly is. It's such a nice environment where everybody knows everybody. And did you see many changes when he became governor to this town?
People came maybe just to pass through, but as far as the change of the function of the stores in town, no. We remained a small little town in South Georgia. And it was exciting because we got to tell people that we knew him and that he was a great man, never knowing his future plans at that time.
Sure. And what was the town's reaction when he made it public that he was going to run for president?
Total shock, I would say. Even myself, I thought it took you twice to become governor. You think the whole United States will elect you as a president from a small town in the South, where a lot of people think we talk slow, therefore we must be slow, and we're not. We live a slow life. And I was really, really amazed. But I really didn't know he had been planting seeds the whole time he was governor.
Now, like everything since I've been coming here that I've seen, and I'm sure this happened, and I've heard stories of it, but it seemed like many people in the area and in the town rallied around Jimmy Carter when he said he was going to become president, when he was going to run for president.
We said, if this man wants to do this, we'll stand behind him and we'll be part of his group of people who are going to share him with the United States in hopes that he will be elected.
Share him with the United States.
That's right.
I love that.
He is a treasure.
He is a treasure. And I've heard him say before that if it wasn't for peanuts, he wouldn't have became president. And I know about the Peanut Brigade, and I believe your husband George was part of that Peanut Brigade.
Yes,
and could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd be glad to. The Peanut Brigade was a group of people from a little bit of everywhere who went on their own money, bought their own tickets to different states and went as a group and then spanned out in towns to tell people about Jimmy Carter. And of course we did a lot of that here. And so we kind of felt like we were his ambassadors here, those of us who did not go. But then in the parade, my husband was asked to walk in the parade with the Peanut Brigade. And that's one of his favorite pictures from the inaugural parade, is his picture carrying the banner in the inaugural parade.
Walking in the parade with that inauguration is the key word, because the president, newly elected president and first lady, shocked everybody when they got out and walked.
Not everybody, but especially his mother. She was not happy at all that the Secret Service was going to allow them to walk. She feared that someone might try to take his life.
Sure.
And they assured her, while we were having lunch before the parade, that they would do everything in their power to protect him. And of course they certainly do and still do today. But it just showed that he wanted to be out with the people, as he had done when he was campaigning.
And as he still does today.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. How did you see that, or not how did you see, but what changes did you see when he became president? Now I know the town did change. And I know you could probably go on and on about that, but what were the major changes that you saw? I'm sure it started when he was running for president, when it came clear that he was going to win the nomination, and when he won the nomination, the Democratic nomination. But when he actually was president, what major changes did you see?
People, 10,000 people a day in a town that had a population then of less than 700 people. Every store in town probably sold some type of souvenir, or they were a restaurant. We had no parking places for the local people. Our grocery store had to go out of business because we couldn't get to it. It became a souvenir shop. But every store on Main Street had a business in it, and it was phenomenal for this town to just wake up pretty soon after we saw how well he was doing in the campaign, and then of course after he was elected, to a whole new world.
And now when he got elected, I understand you went to Washington as well during the time of the inauguration.
Yes, it was a wonderful honor to be able to travel with the Carters to Washington on Air Force One. Some people say it's Air Force Two, but they sent the plane for him. And then I stayed with Amy and took care of her through the inauguration and for a few days after the inauguration. I happened to have the honor of teaching her in the 4th grade here. And 2 Secret Service men who sat in my classroom, which was wonderful. And they learned a lot, they told me. So I was glad they were listening to what I was teaching. And it was great. Amy was a wonderful student, very strong-minded and willed like any of the Carter children are. And I'd like to tell a sweet story, if I can, about Amy.
You go right ahead.
When we got ready to go down for the inaugural address, and I made sure that we had used the facilities and put our coat back on. And of course, we had on more clothes than we'd ever worn in our lifetime, because it never snows here. And I was brushing her little coat down to be sure that everything was perfect. And there was a slight bulge in her pocket. And I said, Amy, Miss Jan needs whatever you have in your pocket. It doesn't look good in your coat. And she said, I really don't want to give you that. And I said, well, you must give it to me. It's not an option. And so she pulled it out, and it happened to be a book. All the Carters read. And I said, Amy, what were your plans with this book? She looked at me with those beautiful little eyes and said, you know how boring some of Daddy's speeches can be. She said, if his speech today is boring, I'm just going to read my book, so I'll behave. And I thought, oh, would the world not love that, you know? So I kept the book during the inaugural address, and she sat very ladylike and listened to her father as he became the president.
Oh my goodness, what a story.
Could have been a disaster.
It could have been. When you went into the White House for the first time, I would think that the feeling was surreal. Tell me what you felt.
Amazing. I've never seen a more beautiful house. It is America's house. And I'm so glad that the people of America can go and visit. But of course, we went in and went directly to the family floor, which is just wonderful. Mrs. Carter went up shortly after President Carter won the election. And she got to choose the furniture that she wanted for the White House on the family floor. She did not tell Amy what she had chosen for her bedroom. And when we walked in, Amy was not real pleased. She told her mother, I don't like that canopy on that bed. It was beautiful, lace canopy. But then when her mother shared that it was Caroline Kennedy's bed she had chosen, then it had a more significant meaning to her.
Sure.
She was a little bit of a tomboy, which was great. Most children who grow up in the South do become little tomboys if they're girls, because there's just so much to do on a farm and to play, and sometimes many of your playmates are little boys, and it was just great. And so she adjusted to her canopy, but she later told me that she had them remove it after I left the White House.
Okay.
Pleasing Miss Jan again.
Yeah,
okay.
of course. She was how old then?
She was 8 when he won and 9 when we went. And she's 50 now.
Okay.
So I was such a young woman with such a wonderful opportunity in my life.
Sure. And, I found, through talking to people, most people think that Amy's the only child that the Carters have.
They sure do.
Most people do think that. Just tell me about the other children.
Well, they have 3 boys. Amy was born 17 years after her youngest brother, so she came late in their family planning. He said that he really wanted a girl, and so he got a beautiful one. And 2 of the sons and their wives did live in the White House with the Carters on an upper floor during the time he was president. When I have told other people that, people would say, well, we must have fed the whole family. And what's interesting is the food that the first family eats is paid for by them on the family floor, not by we Americans.
Sure.
We pay for the expensive meals downstairs.
Yeah.
So, but they were there close, and it was wonderful that the Carters could keep their family close by.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned earlier you were Amy's school teacher, and we talked about that. You mentioned it kind of briefly, but I believe you said you were a 4th grade teacher,
right.
And you taught what subject or
English and math.
English and math. Okay, and you taught Amy for just the 4th grade.
Yes, that was all.
Here in Plains.
Here in Plains.
Here in
Yes.
Plains. Her and then she had schooling. And what did she do in Washington D.C.? Was she private school or did she go to?
She went to a public school. Her father believes in public education.
Okay.
And she went to a public school and did very well there.
Great. And what was it like being a teacher and having Secret Service agents in your room?
Well, if we have any teachers who may be watching this, I would suggest if you can afford one and you're having discipline problems, they're wonderful. But I didn't need them, but I was glad they were there.
Sure.
And I knew their purpose for being there. But I enjoyed having them. Most of her agents were men who had families. So they knew how children were and how children can be rambunctious and want to do different things, and they were most cooperative with what Amy and I sometimes wanted to do.
Well, you've had a long-standing working relationship with the Secret Service, because I know you still work with the Secret Service. I know visitors here think you're Secret Service sometimes. You wear a lot of hats in this small town, and just tell me some of the things that you, some of the hats you have worn and still do wear in this town, because I know there's a lot.
There is a lot. Besides taking care of Amy and being her teacher during the first election, I also was Miss Lillian Carter's secretary, and that was wonderful. Miss Lillian was a lady way before her time. She made her own money by working outside the home, and she pretty much gave it to whoever had a need, no matter what color their skin was. She was a wonderful example to me to, if you have a goal in life, to go for it. She didn't mind how old she was. She went to the Peace Corps when she was in her 60s. She would tell you exactly what she thought about you, and very quick-spoken. And sometimes I see that in myself. But she was a wonderful example to me as a young woman. Then after the Carters went to Washington, I continued teaching and then had 2 beautiful children. And my daughter is named after Amy. And Amy would come home and babysit. I didn't have a problem with that because I also had 2 Secret Service men babysitting, supposedly. But I did not pay the agents. I just paid Amy to babysit. After teaching, I went into banking, and one of my best stories about banking is President Carter told me not long ago that he's never used an ATM. But he said when he has a need for that he might let me show him how to do that, and I would love to be able to do that. And then after I retired from banking, then I went into helping here in Plains to run the beautiful historic inn that the Carters are so much a part of, an antique mall, a community center. I help with the festivals we have here every year, and we celebrated our 100th birthday here in Plains in 1985. I was a part of that. one of the three people in charge of planning it, and that's when President Carter got Willie Nelson to come and do a concert for us. So I've been very much involved in the love of this town and the love for the Carters.
We'll talk about the historic inn because we're sitting in the 1970s presidential suite.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the history of the inn and how it came about.
All right. We have an organization here called the Better Hometown Program. They want to improve our town and to take buildings that are not being used. If they are able to acquire them, we do, and then we make them into useful businesses. This building that we're now sitting in used to be a mercantile store owned by Jimmy Carter's uncle and first cousin as time went on. When they both passed away, we were able to purchase it, and Mrs. Carter wanted an antique mall. President Carter wanted an inn for people to be able to spend the night. No one ever built a motel in Plains. A lot of people say, I don't understand why you never had any motels built. Well, my father-in-law had a saying because some people came and asked him to sell some of the land that my father-in-law owned. And he said, God doesn't make any more land, so if you don't need to sell it, you hold on to it. And so we would not sell any of the land, which was prime property for a motel, not knowing what the future of Plains, and we wanted something really nice.
Sure.
So what we have here at the inn is absolutely magnificent, honoring President Carter's life.
Tell me a little bit about the Carters' involvement when this inn was being built. What did President Carter do and what did Mrs. Carter do?
We might as well have said that he was a project manager. In our inn, every room has 2 brick walls, and we left them just like you see them here.
Sure.
And then other walls had to be put up because really upstairs where we are now was just 2 great big rooms, so we had to have some walls put up. So being a part of the Plains government, being over the Better Hometown Program, we were able to get inmates from our local correctional institute in Americas who had carpentry skills to be brought over with a guard, and these are minimal security, and they worked alongside President Carter putting up all the walls that are not brick. What an example he was to them. And we had somebody design the inn for us, and he helped to build each of the rooms. Mrs. Carter helped to select the furniture and the way the rooms would be set up. So they both were very, very involved in what we did here at the inn.
And each suite here has a decade theme.
Yes, it does.
To it.
We start in the 1920s when he was born in the 20s and go through the 80s when he came home from Washington. So whatever decade our guests stay in, their furnishings look like the decade. Plus we have reading material from the decade. It's fun to read a magazine published in 1920. The ads are amazing. And a lot of questions that I get sometime. Number one is, in the 1920s and 30s, do we use an outhouse or a privy? And of course they don't. But the bathroom is totally different from one that they may have seen here in the United States, not in other foreign countries.
Sure.
But so we do a tremendous job here, not only of giving our guests an unforgettable stay, but also an unforgettable experience.
I can agree with that, definitely. You, as part of the community, we're talking about all the hats that you wear. You belong to Maranatha Baptist Church, and that's the same church that President and Mrs. Carter belonged to. And he's famous for his Sunday school teachings. You have been a coordinator there, if that's the right term. You have been a coordinator there for many years, helping to make that a terrific experience for people from all over the world. Just tell me about the Sunday school experience at Maranatha when President Carter is in town and teaching there.
It started out with just a few people, and then President Carter wrote a lot of books about his faith. He has a new one coming out around Easter about faith, too. Then people found out that he taught Sunday school because when he did book interviews, he always said he did. So we began to have hundreds of people come. At Maranatha, we feel like we are a mission field. people come to us to hear him. And of course, then they get to hear a wonderful message during the worship service, and then the Carters continue to do pictures with families who come. We also are aware that not everybody comes necessarily to worship. But we have had so many people who have come and have told some of us members, this is the first time I have ever been to church. What do I do? What do I not do? So we realized that we needed to have some guidelines because we did not want our worship service to become an event that people took over in our church. And that was one of my main jobs, was to be sure that the people there were having a worshipful experience, because the members of the church wanted to continue to have a worshipful experience.
Sure.
So it has grown and grown and grown, and there are Sundays that we have to turn people away because our church was built not to accommodate all the hundreds of people who have come now in the past years, but to be a good-sized church to hold the membership. And it is amazing, and of course we've had more people now realize that he's 93, he's a cancer survivor, and if they're going to see him, they better come on. And now he's decided to cut back some, which I wish that he didn't have to, but I know it's best for him. I don't ever want to put him in a position where he is not comfortable, nor does he say to himself, you know, I'm really tired. Why do I keep doing this? So when he announced to us several months ago he was going to cut back to 2 Sundays a month, I had a sense of relief that he is thinking about himself and not about us and others.
Sure.
Which he doesn't do a lot of times.
Still,
he always wants to be there for everybody else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, still what a treat. I mean, he's there.
He's my Sunday school teacher every Sunday, and I love it.
Yes.
I just love it.
Yeah. And I can tell that you love it. And, you know, what do the Carters mean to you and to this town?
I guess as he's gotten older, I have to think about that more, because there will come a day where he will not be physically here with us. But when I look at President and Mrs. Carter's life, both of them, and not enough is said about her. She is a tremendous Southern lady herself. I have a sense of knowing what he has meant to my state, to my city, to the United States, and to the entire world. But when he is not here to continue to do his work, he's done a tremendous job in making sure his work will continue at the Carter Center. He is, without the National Park Service here in Plains, our little town would be like a ghost town. So they are absolutely phenomenal for my town. But for them, in my personal aspect, I know that he is truly a man and she is truly a woman who lives a Christian life 7 days a week, not just on Sundays. But when he teaches his lesson, I know that he teaches from his heart and from his lifestyle. And she's sitting right there listening to her wonderful husband of 71 years teach her some more about Christianity. And they have a lot of discussions, he tells us, at home. They read the Bible together every day. So I guess if I could say what they mean to me is I have made notes and tried to soak it all in, because I know of no two greater Americans that you could watch and pattern your life after than Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. They are two national treasures of this United States and the entire world.
I agree. Definitely agree. And that was very, very well said.
Thank you.
Could you give us I know you've got a million of them, but could you give us a story that means something to you or that stands out in your mind about Plains or the Carters and Plains, but but something here that's a favorite anecdote of yours.
I'm going to have to go to a church story.
That's fine.
There's one thing about President Carter. I don't think he has any clue, or he doesn't let on like he does, of what he means to other people. I had a group of people who came to church one Sunday, and the lady in charge of the group came to me and said, there's a man sitting on the front row who went to the Naval Academy with President Carter, and he is in stage 4 cancer. Do you think there's any way that you could let President Carter know that? And I said, yes, ma'am, I will let him know that, because he likes to know things that is important to him. And we know him so well, we kind of know that. Yeah. So I went and told him, and I said, Mr. Jimmy, I'm going to stand in front of this little man, and if you feel led to come over and say something to him, you will know which one he is. And he said, okay, that'll help me. So I stood in front of him, and he did his regular routine when he came into Sunday school, and he didn't come over. And my heart kind of sunk. I thought, did I not make it clear enough? Was he listening to me? Oh, dear God, please, if there's some way that he can remember what I said, now's the time for him to remember it. I was just about ready to move, and he looked over and saw me. And he said, excuse me, class, I have something I need to do. So he came over to my little man and squatted down, and he said, I understand we were at the Naval Academy together. Well, the little man, in his condition, just began to weep. And so President Carter took his hands, and he said, my fellow sailor, I promise that I will pray for you every day for the life that you have left. And it was so touching. Nobody else in that audience knew what Mr. Jimmy was doing except those with the little man sitting around him. And so then Mr. Jimmy stood back up, got his composure back, went right ahead and taught the class. And my heart was just filled to overflowing, because I knew I had made a difference in that little man's life. 3 weeks later, the lady in charge of the group called me to tell me the little man had passed away. But he said that was the moment in his life that he knew he was ready to leave this earth, when he got to speak to Jimmy Carter. I shared it with Mr. Jimmy, and he teared up, but I just really don't think he ever has a clue. Some people, when they see him, they begin to weep. Some people want to hug him, to touch him, and we try not to have a lot of that go on due to he's a cancer survivor, and we don't want him to get sick for anything. But it's almost like Scripture in the Bible. If I could just reach out and touch him, I could be. And he doesn't want people to feel that way. He just wants people to take his lesson that he teaches every Sunday and use it in their everyday life. That is what he wants from the people who come. But when people come to hear him teach, I try to make sure that they understand that he is our only president who ever taught a Sunday school class when he was president, and our only former president who does it today. So you are sitting in the audience of a man who led our nation, tried to correct our world, who believes and lives it. And he's just such a tremendous example. We'll share with you that it's been predicted that the day that we have his funeral here in Plains, which I hope will never happen, that we should expect 40,000 people who will just want to catch a glimpse of something in this town on the day of his funeral here. That is going to be astronomical for my town, but those work plans have been in the works for many, many years, and we have every organization from GEMA to FEMA to everybody, the Army, the Navy, everybody will be here to assist our town in letting us as citizens of this town live through what we're experiencing without having our lives totally disrupted. And it's going to be an unreal day here for us, and then it will take us a lot of time to get over not having him with us all the time.
He'll always be in this town.
He will be.
His footprints are here.
He will be. But, and that's why, all of our stories we're trying to document.
Sure.
As we get older, we sometimes kind of forget. But they are unforgettable people.
Well, Jan, you not only lived history, you made history.
I am a part of it, yes I am.
And it's a pleasure to call you my friend. And I just appreciate you sitting down and having this conversation with me today. And I so much appreciate our friendship. And doing what you do is just phenomenal. And again, you not only lived the history, but you've made history. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
You're a dear friend. A dear friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.